In the ancient kingdom of Ilu Aye, there lived a girl named Morayo. Her name meant one who brings joy. And indeed, her presence in the village was like sunlight after a long storm. Morayo was the youngest of 4 daughters, and though her beauty surpassed her sisters and the young maidens in the kingdom, it was her wisdom that set her apart. My Ayo will stun princess into silence with her beauty, her father would boast to any who would listen. Her father, Adebayo, a renowned hunter, and her mother, Orunfunke, a master weaver, had raised their daughters with care. But Morayo was restless, seeking something beyond the quiet life her family lived. Her 3 older sisters, Abeni, Ireti, and Modupe, were each blessed with a craft nurtured by their mother's ever-attentive hand. And while Morayo was gifted and could become a weaver herself of equal renown as her mother, she was always out in the village in search of thrills and adventure. The young maidens had suitors aplenty, but Morayo had only the wind in her hair and the river's murmur to listen to. Her sisters would laugh. You're waiting for your prince, Morayo, but the only prince who comes to you is the what's in your dreams. But Morayo didn't mind. She wanted something greater. But the fates, as they often do, were quiet, until one day they arrived in the shape of a young man. He was Tunde, and he seemed to Morayo to have appeared out of the very earth. No title, no wealth to speak of, and not much of a family either. Only the forest and his carving tools. He was an orphan, as the story went, with no kin to speak of, but his hands carved wonders from wood, figures so lifelike they almost seemed to breathe. Morayo saw him first, by the riverbank, where he was carving a lion from the trunk of a fallen tree. His knife moved like a dance, and the lion's mane seemed to ripple in the breeze. When he looked up and caught her gaze, his eyes were like a dark pool, full of mystery, full of stories. "Who are you?" Morayo asked, though she already knew the answer. There were rumors in the village about a sculptor with no family, and it would seem she had found him. No one told me he was such a fine beast of a man. Morayo was stunned. "I am Tunde," he said as simply, eyeing the gorgeous young woman with suspicion. "Where did you come from?" Lost for words, all she could manage was a delicate finger pointed in the direction of the village. "Well, I am busy. This is my work, and you are a distraction." Morayo couldn't believe her ears. Here was a man who seemed completely unfazed in her presence. Baba lied. This man isn't stunned at all. But she was drawn to him, not just for his carvings, but for who he was. She left quietly, wondering now what her father would think of this man. Weeks passed, and Morayo found herself seeking Tunde out, often pretending to visit the river. She began to help him with his work, and he spoke of distant lands far to the east. She wanted to see them with him. When she expressed this, his eyes lit up. "I'll take you," he promised. But soon, tragedy struck. Morayo's father, Adebayo, was killed on a hunting trip, leaving the family shaken. Morayo's sisters each married men who could provide security. Abeni married a merchant from a distant land. Ireti wed a soldier with a heavy sword and a quick temper. Modupe, ever the practical one, took a man who could help her with her weaving. But Morayo could not marry just any man. She wanted someone who saw beyond titles and wealth, someone who understood her. Despite the growing bond between Morayo and Tunde, her sisters whispered doubts. Is this the man our sister will marry? The poor carver, Abeni, Ireti, and Modupe, though content with their own marriages, could not understand why their youngest sister would choose a man of no standing, no wealth, no title. They began to voice their concerns to Orunfunke, who, though silent, could not hide her disapproval in the way she eyed Tunde when he visited. But Morayo was steadfast in her heart. Tunde was the one for her. However, her family's concerns began to take root. Her sisters suggested she court a wealthy suitor. Reluctantly, Morayo agreed, though her heart remained with Tunde. Tunde soon noticed her absence, and his heart sank. He saw Morayo with the merchant, and his own jealousy began to grow. It was like watching a piece of his heart slowly slip away. Weeks passed, and one day, Tunde was seen walking through the village with another woman, a beautiful young woman, laughing as they talked. Morayo was in the market, and when she saw them together, the sight hit her like a poisoned arrow. She watched from a distance, heart pounding in her chest. The woman's voice was like honey, and the way Tunde laughed in return stirred something deep within her. "What is this bitter feeling in my chest?" Morayo asked herself, her mind racing. The days that followed were filled with questions she could not ask anyone. Who was this woman? What did she mean to Tunde? Why had he not told her about her? Morayo tried to dismiss her feelings of jealousy, but they rose like a storm, clouding her thoughts. When she confronted Tunde about the woman, his answer was simple, but it cut her deeply. "Morayo," he said gently, "this is Timilehin. She is a friend, nothing more. And have you forgotten? It was you that left me." Morayo knew she had made a mistake, but Tunde was in no mood to listen to her. He no longer worked on his carvings by the river, and Morayo's heart, once full of love, was now shadowed by doubt. She watched Tunde with a new kind of weariness, convinced that he, not her, was the betrayer. Her mind started to twist the truth, and in the quiet corners of the night, the whispers of betrayal became louder. Morayo knew what she had to do. While no one was watching, she snuck after Tunde, following him until he met Timilehin, and when they parted, she followed the woman to her back to her house. Her anxiety grew as she recognized the path the beautiful woman followed. "The royal palace is up ahead. Is Tunde, my poor handsome carver, friends with royalty now?" Morayo turned back and went home with more questions than answers. Weeks passed, and Tunde's carvings began to attract more attention. Word spread about his talent, and he was invited to showcase his work in the royal court. The same night, Morayo's father, Adebayo, was honored posthumously by the village elders for his service to the kingdom. But the joy of the evening was marred by Morayo's growing sense of isolation. Timilehin, too, grew closer to Tunde, and soon their friendship became something more. They were often seen talking at the river, sharing quiet moments under the shade of the trees, and walking together through the market. It wasn't long before Morayo saw it too. Morayo couldn't take it anymore. The jealousy was like fire in her veins, and her heart, once sure of her feelings, was now clouded with doubt. She sought Tunde out, determined to confront him. She found him at the riverbank, his hands skillfully shaping a piece of wood. Timilehin stood nearby, quietly observing him. The sight of them together, so peaceful, so in sync, made Morayo's heart pound with a mixture of rage and hurt. Tunde looked up as Morayo approached, his expression softening when he saw her. But there was something different in his eyes, something that made her stomach twist. "Morayo," he said gently, his voice almost apologetic. "What's wrong?" Her voice was tight with emotion, but she pushed the words out, each one like a dagger. "Do you love her now?" Morayo's eyes flickered to Timilehin. who stood off to the side, her gaze averted. You laugh with her. You share things with her, things you never shared with me. You left me to be with a wealthy man, Tunde yelled in frustration. His words fell like a blow to Morayo. I can't keep waiting for something that won't happen. You've made your choice, and I have to make mine. Morayo staggered backward, her mind racing. So this is it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You've moved on? Tunde's eyes were filled with regret, but his resolve was firm. I have to, Morayo. I can't keep pretending. The words cut through her like a storm. And in that moment, she realized that the man she had thought would be hers forever was slipping away. Her heart, once full, now felt empty, broken. Without a word, she turned and walked away, the weight of her own decisions settling on her shoulders. Morayo decided she would wed Kambi, the wealthy merchant. As the day of her wedding approached, Morayo's heart hardened. The merchant who had courted her made it clear he wanted her as a third wife, not an equal. The realization struck like a blade. This was not the life she had dreamed of. She had made the wrong choice. Then the news of Tunde's upcoming wedding was the final dagger in her broken heart. She had made mistakes she could no longer undo, but she would not be overlooked. She would not watch him marry someone else. On the day of the wedding, Morayo's heart raced. She watched them from a distance. Tunde, the man she had once loved, and Timilehin, the woman who had taken him from her. Timilehin was no ordinary woman. She was the daughter of the king's favored concubine, a woman who carried both beauty and influence. Well, she would take back what was hers. She would confront them both face to face and force them to see the mistake they were about to make. As the party began to dwindle, she chose her moment. "You can't have him," Morayo shouted, stepping forward. The crowd gasped in shock as she approached them, eyes burning with fury. Timilehin recoiled, and Tunde looked at Morayo with sadness. "Morayo, this isn't the way," he said. But Morayo, consumed by rage, lunged toward Timilehin. Tunde intervened, but in the chaos, a knife she had concealed in the folds of her iro slipped into his side. Blood seeped from the wound, staining Morayo's hand. Tunde gasped, sinking to his knees. "Morayo," he whispered, "you didn't have to." "I didn't mean it," she stammered, horror filling her. Timilehin knelt beside Tunde, cradling his head in her lap. "Tunde," she cried out. Morayo, trembling with guilt, turned and fled into the night. She ran, her breath ragged, until she collapsed in the thicket. She had killed him, she realized. She had destroyed everything. As the sound of footsteps approached, Morayo couldn't bring herself to face the truth of her actions. She ran deeper into the wilderness, away from the consequences, away from the life she had shattered. She could not face herself or the world she had ruined.